All right. So again, we're still in effective language. We talked about economy of your sentences, economy of words, and shortening them and being concise. Yes, and we also talked about different types of figurative language. To follow in that, your textbook actually divides some of this up. And here there are terms like assonance and consonants and parallelism that kind of fall into the sound devices of figurative language, okay? The similes and metaphors, that type of figurative language, and the comparisons and contrasts, it all falls into that same category. But we also want to think about our word choice when it comes to sounds with our words, okay? So assonance is actually, have you heard that term before? Okay, assonance is what? The repetition of what kinds of sounds? The vowel sounds, okay? Yeah, and consonance is the repetition of your consonant sounds. And it doesn't, with the consonant sounds, of course, the vowel sounds can be at any part of the sentence. The consonant sounds too, when we're talking about not just alliteration, but consonance itself is repetition of any consonant sounds anywhere in the word. Not, we usually think of it in alliteration as at the beginnings of the words, but it can actually be the rhyming of sounds repeating those consonant sounds in different parts of the word, in the middle of the word, at the end of the word, so that you have those similarities, okay? And using those things does have an effect on what you say. It affects how it sounds. It creates more of a poetic effect without your audiences maybe actually realizing that, okay? They just know it sounds nice sometimes. When you listen to something, you're like, oh, that's really, you may not think consciously about, oh, well, they're using assonance or they're using consonants to create an effect, but it's there. Same thing happens in music, song lyrics. Song lyrics are poetry, and they're using all of these devices, okay? So we also want to talk about parallelism a little bit. Parallelism is when we did yesterday briefly mention it. It's when you're setting up the phrases that they're set up the same way. Like one of the best examples is from A Tale of Two Cities. It was the worst of times, it was the best of times. Or it may be reversed, I can't remember. I always forget which part, if it's the best or worst first. But it's the same phrase, but with a word changed. It's a contrast, but it's also parallelism, okay? And that creates a certain flow to your language. And then, now these two aren't necessarily sounds, but jargon and slang are important that we understand and not necessarily use them. We want to try and avoid them in our speeches. Why? Yes, not everybody knows the jargon. Not everybody knows the slang. There are different terms that are used by different groups of people. Even just going to a different high school, you may have a different meaning for something or a different word that you're using. And jargon, that's the words that we use depending on the group of, or what you're studying. Like scientists have certain jargon that they use. Teachers, we have certain jargon that we use. And then, we have students, different sports groups and things like that, and you have certain terms and jargon that you use. That's what that's all about. And you have to be careful when you're putting a speech together. And we've talked about this before, that you want to make sure that you're not overusing those things or being very careful in your use of them if you have to use them. That you're talking to a group of people that will understand what you're saying. So it's best to just try to avoid using that kind of language, okay? It's not bad, it's just not very useful. It's not very helpful in your speech, okay? So with these, I'm actually going to ask you to do a poetry exercise today, okay? Let's go to that. It's not difficult. And I'm also going to give you time to finish the Kennedy assignment that's due Monday, okay? Because I know a lot of you were struggling to get, like I can't get that. You got it done?
Mm-hmm.
Did you really? That's great.
Well, I had to because tonight I have to work on essay for history.
Okay.
And I just had an essay last hour.
Okay.
And then I also got to study for my own exam and then math homework. And then
Okay.
there's probably more.
There's probably.
I don't know yet. Until we get to Spanish.
Okay. All right. So you just went ahead and we're thinking ahead. That's good. Okay. You do. You have to think about these things and when you're going to get them done. Okay. Let's see. Where is it? Oh, poetry search. Here's what I want you to do. This is short, so you'll have time to do it and then get the Kennedy assignment done. It says, find an example of a poem using assonance. It's not something we typically look for, but I want you to find one using that uses assonance or the repetition of vowel sounds, okay? Some suggestions are poems by Emily Dickinson, Edgar Allan Poe, Dylan Thomas. These are three poets that do a lot of that. Yes?
Does it need to be longer?
I guess a sentence or two is
Oh,
fine.
shoot, we're talking about this.
Yes. So paste the poem into the text entry and submit it, and be prepared to share it with the class on Monday, okay? So you're just finding a poem with assonance, all right? And these are three poets that I would suggest you look at. They're known for their poems like this, okay?
Would it be fun if everyone had the same three?
Well, but they also all have lots of poems, so you could pick quite a
Everyone's
few.
probably going to do like their.
Emily
best poem.
Dickinson has short poems. Hers are pretty short. And did you know something about Emily Dickinson? Do you know the song I'd Like to Teach the World to Sing? Okay. Pretty much any of Emily Dickinson's poems can be sung to that tune. She has a poem, Because I Could Not Stop for Death, He Kindly Stopped for Me. Because I could not stop for death, He kindly stopped for me. Da, 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 da. I know. Okay, it's silly, but it's true.
Do we have to do anything to the poem or just be?
No, I just want you to find one that's an example. I didn't even ask you to underline anything. Okay? I just want you to find a poem that is an example of it and submit it here. Okay? And then work on finishing up that Kennedy assignment. You still have 25 minutes. Okay? Do you guys on here have any questions? And if not,
that quiz